I've always believed that people's hearts reveal more than their wallets ever could. Working as a waitress at Maple Diner for 5 years had taught me that. Some customers come with fancy cars and leave nothing but crumbs of arrogance behind, while others walk in with worn-out shoes and leave you with something that lingers: kindness. And then there was Arjun. Every morning, without fail, he would sit at the same booth by the window, always in that brown coat, his hat perfectly tilted, and a newspaper folded neatly by his cup of coffee. He'd order the same thing: 2 slices of toast, sunny-side-up eggs, and a cup of black coffee. But it wasn't what he ordered that caught my attention. It was how he did it. "Good morning, Natasha," he'd say softly, his voice trembling a little, but his eyes sparkling with a warmth that reminded me of my late grandfather. "How's your mother doing? The knee pain still bothering her?" He remembered everything, every small thing I ever mentioned. In a world where I was mostly invisible, Arjun saw me. I'd often help him butter his toast because his hands shook too much. At first he resisted, said he didn't want to be a burden, but over time it became our little morning ritual. He'd smile as I spread the butter and say, "You'll make someone very lucky one day, Natasha. You have a good heart." I'd laugh, pretending not to blush. Money was tight. I worked double shifts just to keep up with rent and my mother's medicine. But somehow, talking to Arjun every morning made it all feel lighter, like life still had pieces of kindness tucked between the chaos. He never spoke much about his family, just vague hints. They're busy, or they have their own worlds now. Sometimes I'd see his eyes drift to the window, watching the world go by, his coffee long gone cold. One morning, I noticed he didn't come. Then another, and another. I told myself maybe he was sick or visiting relatives, but the empty booth by the window felt heavier each day, like it was missing its heartbeat. A week passed before something strange happened. Just as I was serving coffee to a couple in the corner, the diner door swung open. 4 tall men in black suits stepped in, followed by 2 lawyers holding briefcases. The entire diner fell silent. You could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the back. "Are you Natasha?" one of them asked, scanning the room until his eyes met mine. I froze, the tray trembling slightly in my hands. "Yes, I'm Natasha. What's going on?" He exchanged a glance with the lawyer beside him before replying, "We're here on behalf of Mr. Arjun." My heart skipped a beat. "Is he okay?" The lawyer nodded solemnly. "Mr. Arjun passed away 3 days ago." The cup slipped from my hand, shattering against the floor. Before I could even process the words, the lawyer continued, "He left something for you. We're here to discuss it. Privately." Everyone in the diner was staring now. My legs went weak, my thoughts tangled. I didn't know then, but that moment was about to change my life forever. The diner had never felt so silent. All eyes were on me. The girl who poured coffee and cleaned tables, now being approached by lawyers and men in black suits. My heart was thudding so loud I could hear it echo inside my ears. "Please," I stammered, trying to regain my composure. "Let's go outside." We stepped out into the crisp morning air. The streets were busy, yet it felt like the world had frozen around me. One of the lawyers, a middle-aged man with calm eyes, extended a folder toward me. "Mr. Arjun named you in his will," he said quietly. "He considered you someone very important." My hands trembled as I took the folder. "But why?" "I was just a waitress. I served him breakfast. That's all." He gave me a small, knowing smile. To him, that meant everything. The bodyguards waited near a black luxury car parked across the street. The lawyer motioned for me to follow. "If you can spare an hour, we'd like to take you to his estate." He wanted you to see something personally. I hesitated. I didn't even know where to begin. Was this real, a prank? But something deep inside told me to go. As we drove through the city, I kept thinking about Arjun. His kind eyes, the way he smiled when I brought his coffee just right, how he always asked about my mom. I'd known him as a gentle old man, quiet and humble. Never once did I imagine he had lawyers or bodyguards. After a 30-minute drive, the car turned down a long tree-lined road. At the end stood a massive iron gate that opened slowly, revealing a sprawling mansion surrounded by gardens. My breath caught in my throat. This can't be real, I whispered. The lawyer nodded. It's very real. This was Mr. Arjun's home. Inside, the air smelled faintly of old books and sandalwood. Paintings lined the walls and sunlight streamed through tall windows onto marble floors. I followed the lawyer into a quiet study where a framed photo of Arjun sat on the desk. He looked exactly as I remembered him, warm, gentle, and smiling. The lawyer placed an envelope on the desk and handed it to me. He left this letter for you. My fingers shook as I tore it open. The handwriting was shaky but familiar. Dear Natasha, if you are reading this, it means my journey has ended, and yours is about to begin. You were the one person who saw me, not for what I owned, but for who I was. Every morning you gave me kindness when I had nothing left but time. I never told you, but I lost my family long ago. Not to death, but to distance. You reminded me of what love and compassion feel like. In gratitude, I have left you something small, not as payment, but as a thank you for your humanity. My lawyer will explain the details. Please don't refuse it. You earned it in ways money can never measure. With love, Arjun. Tears blurred my vision. My knees felt weak as I clutched the letter to my chest. The lawyer cleared his throat softly. Mr. Arjun left you a portion of his estate, specifically this diner he secretly owned. Maple Diner. He said it should belong to the person who truly kept it alive. I froze. Wait, what? He owned the diner? The lawyer nodded. He was the silent owner for years. He built it in memory of his late wife. She loved simple breakfasts and friendly conversations. He said you reminded him of her. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The very place where I spent every morning struggling to survive was actually his gift to me. I looked around the grand study, then back at his photo. He never told me any of this. Not even once. The lawyer smiled softly. He didn't want gratitude. He just wanted to see kindness still existed in the world. I wiped my tears, my heart aching and full all at once. I had served Arjun breakfast every morning. But in the end, he was the one who fed my soul. That night I couldn't sleep. Arjun's letter was lying beside me, the words still echoing in my head. You reminded me of her, his late wife. The woman he'd loved enough to build a diner in her memory. I kept picturing him sitting in his usual booth, smiling softly as I poured his coffee, maybe seeing a reflection of his past in me. The thought made my chest tighten. I didn't know whether to cry or smile. The next morning, I went back to the diner early before it opened. The place felt different now. The same walls, the same smell of roasted coffee beans, but I could almost feel Arjun there, watching. I walked over to his favorite booth by the window, the one where he sat every single morning. I ran my fingers along the table, tracing the tiny scratches left behind from years of his coffee cup resting there. Something felt off. The table wasn't sitting flat. When I bent down, I noticed a small screw missing underneath. Out of curiosity, I lifted the wooden panel slightly. And that's when I saw it. A small sealed envelope. My hands shook as I pulled it out. It had my name on it. Natasha. I tore it open carefully, expecting another note. But instead, there was a small brass key and a piece of paper folded twice. The paper read, "For the room where love still breathes. No address. No explanation. Just that one line." I stared at it, confused and honestly a little scared. But curiosity outweighed fear. I turned the diner upside down, looking for a door, a locker, anything that could match the key. Nothing. Then I remembered something. The small storage room at the back meant it was always locked. The owner, who I now knew was Arjun, had told us to never go inside. We used it only for cleaning supplies stored outside the door. My heart started racing as I walked toward it. The key fit perfectly. The door creaked open. Inside was a small room filled with dust, the air heavy and still. There was a single chair, an old piano, and a collection of photographs covering one entire wall. I stepped closer, and my breath caught in my throat. The photos were of me, not recent ones. They were taken from years back, when I had just started working there. Me serving coffee, laughing with customers, even helping a crying child one day. Each picture was captured quietly, almost tenderly. But mixed among them were photos of a woman I had never seen before. Elegant, graceful, and smiling in the same booth where Arjun used to sit, and the resemblance was uncanny. It was like looking into a mirror from another time. I sank into the chair, my hands trembling. "Who are you?" I whispered to the woman in the picture. At that moment, I realized what Arjun meant. "You reminded me of her. I wasn't just a waitress to him. I was a living echo of the love he lost." There was one last photograph pinned in the center of the wall, Arjun and that woman together, standing outside a newly opened diner. Underneath it, in faded handwriting, were the words, "For every cup shared in kindness, love returns." Tears streamed down my face. For so long I thought I was helping a lonely old man. But in truth, he had been helping me find my worth, reminding me that kindness still mattered, even when the world forgot to notice. As I turned to leave, I saw a small safe beneath the piano. On it was a note written in Arjun's shaky handwriting, "When the diner's light flickers 3 times, open this." I frowned, confused. But before I could think further, the overhead light above me blinked once, twice, 3 times. The air felt suddenly still. I reached for the safe, inserted the key, and turned it slowly. The lock clicked open. Inside was a small wooden box, and what was inside that box would change everything I thought I knew about Arjun and about myself. My fingers trembled as I lifted the small wooden box out of the safe. It was old, its edges chipped, the surface scratched and faded from time. For a long moment I just stared at it, afraid to open it, afraid of what I might find. Arjun had been gone for only a week, yet it felt as though he had left pieces of himself hidden everywhere, threads connecting me to a story I had never asked to be part of. I drew a deep breath and opened the box. Inside, wrapped in faded velvet, was a locket, a stack of old letters, and a document envelope. The locket caught my eye first. It was golden, heart-shaped, delicate enough that it might break if I held it too tightly. I opened it, and there she was again, the woman from the photographs. Her name, I finally learned from a tiny engraving, was Mira. On the opposite side of the locket was a tiny picture of a young man, Arjun, much younger, smiling, his arm around her. They looked so happy that for a moment, it hurt to breathe. Then I saw something I hadn't noticed before. Behind their photo, tucked carefully inside, was a torn piece of newspaper. I unfolded it, my eyes scanning the faded headline, "Business tycoon's wife and daughter missing after car crash, presumed dead." My heart lurched. "Daughter?" I read the first few lines. The tragic accident took place on a rainy night. Arjun Malhotra's wife, Mira, and their 5-year-old daughter disappeared after their car plunged off the old coastal bridge. Rescue teams recovered no bodies. The words blurred as tears stung my eyes. Arjun had lost a wife and a daughter, but if the bodies were never found... I looked back at the photographs on the wall. The woman in them, Mira, looked exactly like me but older, and the little girl standing beside her in one of the older pictures had eyes just like mine. My breath caught in my throat. No, it can't be. Hands shaking, I opened the envelope marked "Confidential." Inside were legal papers, birth certificates, adoption records, DNA reports, and right on top, in bold letters, "Biological relationship, positive, 99.9%. Match." My world tilted. I dropped the papers and sank onto the floor, my heartbeat roaring in my ears. Arjun wasn't just a kind old man who loved my coffee. He was my father. I sat there for what felt like hours, unable to move. My mind was a hurricane of disbelief and memories that suddenly made cruel, perfect sense. His tenderness. The way he remembered my mother's name. The way he looked at me sometimes, like he was memorizing my face. The way he said, "You reminded me of her," He had known all along. I picked up one of the letters from the box, his handwriting neat but trembling. My dearest Natasha, there are truths too painful to speak when one has already lived through loss. I knew who you were from the first day I walked into Maple Diner. The moment you turned and smiled, it felt like time had folded in half, bringing my past into the present. I had searched for you for years after the accident. Your mother, Mira, saved you that night. She managed to escape the car before it sank, but in her attempt to reach land, she was swept away by the current. They found her body 2 days later. You were missing. I thought you had been lost forever. Until one morning I walked into that diner and saw my daughter alive, serving coffee with the same kindness your mother carried in her heart. I wanted to tell you then, but how could I? How could I step into your life after disappearing from it so long ago? You had grown strong without me, so I chose to watch from the sidelines, to be the quiet presence who made sure you never felt alone. Forgive me for the silence, Natasha. You were my miracle, my second chance, and now everything I built, everything I loved, belongs to you. When you open this letter, know that I am finally at peace. I got to spend my last years seeing my daughter smile every morning. That was enough. With eternal love, your father, Arjun. By the time I finished reading, my tears had soaked through the paper. My chest ached in a way words couldn't describe. He had known. All this time, I had spent years serving him coffee, sharing stories about my mom, never realizing the man sitting in front of me was my father, silently cherishing every word like it was a piece of the life he lost. It was too much. Too big, too heavy, too heartbreaking. I wanted to scream. I wanted to hug him. I wanted to ask why he didn't tell me, why he didn't give me the chance to say Dad just once before he left this world. But I also understood. Maybe he was afraid that I wouldn't believe him. Maybe he thought I'd resent him for being absent all those years. Instead, he chose the only way he knew how to love me, quietly, through small acts. Through coffee cups, through the diner that had become my home. When I finally stood up, the dawn light was creeping through the dusty window. The air felt different, lighter, softer, almost sacred. I looked around the little secret room once more. The photographs, the piano, the memories frozen in time, and I realized this wasn't a room of grief. It was a room of love. I picked up the locket again, placed it around my neck and whispered, I found you. Dad. The moment I said it, something inside me broke and healed all at once. A week later, I met with Arjun's lawyers again. They finalized the paperwork transferring ownership of Maple Diner to my name. But there was something else, too, an additional clause in his will. If Natasha chooses to keep the diner, she must promise one thing, to never let a single person eat alone if they can help it. I smiled through my tears. That was him, through and through, always about kindness, always about people. I reopened the diner under a new name, Mira's Light. The first day back, I stood behind the counter wearing a fresh apron and the golden locket. Everything was the same, the smell of buttered toast, the clinking of plates, the low hum of morning chatter, but it all felt different. When I poured the first cup of coffee, I whispered quietly, "This one's for you, Dad." Over the following months, I began to learn more about him through the people who came to the diner. Former employees, business partners, even old friends I never knew existed. They all had stories. Stories of how Arjun had quietly helped people without ever asking for anything in return. A scholarship he funded for a mechanic's son. A loan he forgave for a struggling couple. A woman he helped rebuild her bakery after a fire. He wasn't just a billionaire hiding behind suits and bodyguards. He was a man who had found redemption in small acts of kindness. The same kind of kindness he saw in me. One evening, just before closing, I noticed a man in his 30s sitting at Arjun's old booth. He had been there for a while, staring at the table. "Can I get you something?" I asked, gently. He looked up, eyes red-rimmed. "This used to be my father's favorite spot," he said softly. "He always said there was something special about the girl who worked here." My throat tightened. "I think I know who your father was." He nodded. "You must be Natasha." I smiled faintly. And you must be one of the people he helped." He nodded again, but this time his smile reached his eyes. "He saved my business. Told me once that the best investments are made in good people." I guess he was right. For a while, we just sat there in silence, two strangers connected by a man who had changed both our lives. Before he left, he said, "He'd be proud of what you've done here." And in that moment, I felt him there again, the faint warmth of his presence, the smell of his coffee, the soft rustle of his newspaper. Months turned into a year. Mira's Light became more than just a diner. It became a home for everyone who walked through its doors. We started a breakfast for all program, free meals for the elderly and anyone who came in alone. I used a portion of Arjun's inheritance to fund it. Every plate served carried his name, his memory, his kindness, and sometimes, early in the morning before the first customers arrived, I'd sit by the window in his booth with my coffee. I'd close my eyes and whisper, "Good morning, Dad!" And in the faint sunlight streaming through the window, I could almost hear his voice again, warm, gentle, proud. "Good morning, Natasha. Don't forget to butter the toast just right. They say people die twice, once when their heart stops beating, and again when their name is spoken for the last time. But Arjun? He'll never die. Not as long as Mira's Light stands on the corner of Maple Street, serving coffee to those who need it most. Not as long as kindness still lives in the hands that pour, serve, and love without expecting anything back. And not as long as I, his daughter, keep his story alive." The end.